I imagine most people listening to this will be familiar with the full prostration of the Eastern Rite and the three forms of reverence codified by the Council of Trent in the Roman Catholic Church: the head nod, the bow at the waist, and the genuflection. The use of Sarum, as ever, needs some more explanation. There are two ways of the rubrics instructing a priest to make a reverence. They tell him to either make an inclination of his body, or to make what it just refers to as a bow. And to make matters worse, these do not necessarily correspond to the places in the later Tridentine use or the Reformation liturgies of the Western Church, which have similar instructions. Upon initial inspection, it's perfectly possible to conclude that the incline and the bow are referring to the same action. This sort of anachronism wouldn't at all be out of character for the Missal, which is not standardised in the way that we in our multiple print-run non-local use culture think about the standardisation of liturgy. However, there are some problems with this. First and foremost is the instructions which run something along the lines of "he bows upright" or "he bows and then inclines his body." You'd be forgiven for missing these if you were just glancing through the text, but when you're practically performing the liturgy, they become more and more obvious as you contort yourselves into all sorts of strange postures at the altar in an attempt to fulfill the instruction. Aha, I hear the Romans say. Of course, they just mean genuflection when they say bow. Were it that simple. The real reason behind this is that the use of Sarum does indeed have several ways of reverencing the altar. The nod of the head, as I have said, is essentially unknown as a liturgical action prior to the 17th century, and the genuflection as practiced in the Roman Catholic Church as a distinct codified action also dates from that period. So what exactly is meant by a bow in this context? To answer the question, we have to turn to Erasmus, who gives us a good explanation. The same word, which we've translated as bow in our books, Erasmus translates as making curtsy. In 1530, Erasmus published a book called De Civilitate Morum Puerilium, which means On the Civility of Children. The book is a sort of guide on how to raise a good and polite child, and in it, he makes the following observation. Likewise, in making of curtsy, one manner becometh in some places, and in some places it is not comely. Some make curtsy with both knees bowed, as the Irishman, and contrariwise, some do it with upright body, some with body stooping. Some there be that judge that the curtsy of women. Some likewise with upright body make courtesy, first bow the right knee and after the left, which is common among Englishmen, and is laudable in youth. The Frenchmen do bow the right knee, with a little pleasant return of the body, in all such manners, in the which vary or change hath no repugnance with honesty, and it shall be lawful to use the manners of our natural country. At this time there is no distinction made between the bow that's used in church and the bow that's used to make a greeting in the street. Full genuflections do indeed exist and were used, but they cannot be what's described in the rubric because the text often requires the priest to make certain actions at the altar when he is bowed down. An example of this is at the elevation or at the priest's communion. The text requires that the priest bows and holds that bow while consecrating the host or holding up or elevating the paten and the host before consuming it. The bow in England continued in the way described by Erasmus as a sort of half genuflection well into the 17th century, and we have several examples of illustrations from that period. This is the origin of the term bow and scrape. The scrape is the noise of your foot going backwards so that you can bow down slightly, keeping the torso almost erect, and consequently are able to do the various things required at the altar. And once you see this, you will start seeing it everywhere in medieval illustrations of the Mass. All of those weird postures that look at first glance like a peculiar bagging at the back of the priest's vestments when he's performing Mass, or in images where the priest seems to be completely out of proportion to the altar that comes up to above his elbows. They're all illustrating this. It's used as a shorthand in the illustrations to denote that the priest is in the process of performing that holiest part of the service. When I first saw this done at the altar, it was like a revelation in that sense. It looks exactly like the pictures. Of course, I don't want to give the impression that this is particularly important, or that we're trying to do some sort of historical reenactment. As I've said before, this is a liturgical expression which, though ancient in origin, is done by and for people in the 21st century. There are much more important things to worry about, and as Erasmus says, in all such manners in which things vary or change, there is no repugnance with honesty, and it should be lawful to use the manners of our natural country. However, I do use this way of bowing, largely because it makes sense in the context of the liturgy. It's one of those many little aspects of the rite which have slowly unfolded themselves to us over the course of the last 150 years or so, since it was first picked up and dusted off. Like I say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Thanks for watching. If you like what we're doing, or if you want to help support our mission, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope to see you again soon. Benedicat vos, omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.